Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfoud, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Hello, everybody. Al Bielawski. Welcome to another edition of Catholic Mysticism and Spirituality, where we talk about all things of our beautiful faith and the mysticism and the supernatural aspects of our faith, and including topics that are relevant as we have this faith walk in our time here, as we just came out of a decade and are on the year 2020. Hard to believe, but we're here. You know, speaking of that reality, for many people, and including Catholics and Christians, this reality that we can only experience, what we can, see and touch, taste, and feel, is for many the only reality that they can see or that they realize, even if they're practicing their faith. For many, that mystical aspect, that supernatural aspect of Christ and the heavenly realm, it doesn't really aspect their lives. They don't grasp it. For some, faith, mass, whatever it is, becomes almost like a time clock, another thing on the to-do list. Work, raise the kids, play sports, go to movies, entertainment, hit the mass, worship, say a couple prayers, and that's it. It's another thing to do. And they don't develop that supernatural spirituality, that grace that God is willing as a gift to give us, if only through the Holy Spirit we are willing to open our hearts and our minds to let all those graces come through. And if we do, we experience that supernatural. And the more we tap into it, the more we become realizing that this is our true home, that we are heading toward, heaven, that is more of a reality than the world in which we can experience. And even it is a tremendous thing, this world, that life, the gift that God has given us, is a tremendous gift with many great joys. Yes, there are many sorrows. Yes, many troublesome times in our lives. But that was true when Christ walked the earth, because he was fully man, fully human, even though he was God. So, when sometimes in history, when the faith has become stale, when people begin to question, when they get bored with the faith, and they just go through the motions, God gives us a great gift. And one of those gifts I want to talk about tonight is a very famous one. And that is the event of Guadalupe, the Blessed Holy Mother and the apparition of Guadalupe, because it's an important apparition because of what was going on at the time and for us today. And it's an incredible apparition. And scientifically, it's despite all the research and scientific tests on it, it baffles science today. It defies all scientific explanation of its origin. And we're going to talk about that. Because basically what happened, in 1531, a lady from heaven appeared to an Indian at Tepeyac, which was in the northwest part of Mexico City. She identified herself as the Mother of God, the true God, and wanted the bishop to build a temple on the site. And miraculously, she left an image of herself that was imprinted on cactus cloth, which should have deteriorated in 20-something years at best. But believe it or not, still shows no sign of decay some 470-plus years later. And as I mentioned, still defies all scientific explanations of its origin. Some of that science has proved that it even reflects in her eyes what was in front of her in 1531 at the apparition. I want to repeat that. Science has now, with all the advances in technology, when they examine, this is called the tilma, which St. Juan Diego, which we'll talk about, wore, where the image was impressed upon. In her eyes, in that apparition, it reflects what was in front of her way back in 1531. And the lady, our mother, that God has given us at the foot of his cross, asked to be called the Ever Virgin Holy Mary of Guadalupe. Why is this? Well, it's believed that the name Guadalupe came about because of a translation from the Nahuatl language of the time to Spanish of the words used by the Virgin during the apparition. And it's believed that Our Lady used the Aztec word, which is pronounced Guadalupe, and which sounds remarkably like the Spanish word what? Guadalupe. So, Koa meant serpent. Tla, T-L-A, is the noun ending, which can be interpreted as the. While Zopa means to crush or stamp out. So basically, this Aztec Nahuatl word of Cotalaxopo, pronounced Guadalupe, sounds like Guadalupe the Spanish used. But here's the important part for us. Our Lady must have called herself the one who crushes the serpent, Satan. So very important. No coincidence there. Again, with God and those who practice our faith and we tap into that supernatural realm, we know there is no coincidences. Now, let's just do a quick time frame here during these 1531. Because when we come to the Aztec culture, what do we see? That history tells us that they basically offered as a sacrifice over 20,000 men, women, and children to their gods. One of the early Mexican historians estimated that 1 of every 5 children in Mexico was sacrificed. Imagine that, 1 in every 5. And these ritual killings there was a climax in 1487 because the Aztecs had dedicated a new and richly decorated temple with serpents. And a single ceremony lasted 4 days and 4 nights with constant beating of giant drums made of snakeskin. And the Aztec ruler and demon worshiper Tacalael presided over the sacrifice of, get this, of more than 80,000 men. 80,000 men. So we can see this horrendous practice of the Aztecs and their human sacrifice to their god was one issue. Now, across the pond, as they say, in Europe, during these times, what was happening in the 1500s? Well, the Protestant Reformation was going to take place. And many thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Catholics were going to leave the faith when that Reformation took place. So you were going to see on both sides here of the sea that there was some pretty monumental things happening, whether it was the human sacrifice or the Protestant Reformation, which led to tens of thousands of Catholics abandoning their faith, and many that were left questioning. So it is in this particular time frame here, in these 1500s, that we're going to see a very important apparition take place. Now, just to give a again, a general, before we get into the meat and potatoes of the apparition, a general feel for this. I mentioned that the word that Our Lady called herself, Guadalupe, meant one who crushes the serpent. And that certainly happened. Because when you look at this human sacrifice, especially this high point, when they built this temple with all these serpents around it, and the Virgin Mary came, and she was going to crush that serpent. And, as a sidebar here, we see today, for those of us that are listening to the show and saying, oh, how barbaric that is, at one time 80,000 men. Just it's incredible to believe, and not counting the women and children. And 1 every 5 children estimated were sacrificed. And we all agree that's barbaric. And yet today, as we flash forward to the year 2020, millions of unborn children are killed everywhere around the globe. And not only in many countries, sadly, the United States, that are not only legal, but they're supported and financed. This is one of the reasons the church, and its wisdom, our beautiful church, has named Our Lady of Guadalupe as protectress of the unborn, to try and put an end to the abortions. And again, this was dedicated, the Aztecs, to their gods. And abortion today, there were many false idols. It's a lifestyle. Few are done in cases of rape or incest. It's a lifestyle that people do not want to be responsible. They want to enjoy the pleasures of a conjugal act, but not in the context of holy matrimony, but do not want the consequences of that if it turns out not the way they thought it would. So we see, too, with Our Lady of Guadalupe, there's an incredible list of miracles and cures and interventions. That's why we don't give up praying. We continue continuing to pray to Our Lady of Guadalupe for an end to abortion. And it's very interesting because the Basilica of Guadalupe yearly has an estimated 10 million visitors. And it's one of the most, in Mexico City, it's probably the most popular Marian shrine in the world, which says something, since we've got, such famous apparition sites as Fatima and Lourdes. So it's a very interesting apparition, and we're going to get into it right now. So let's begin by talking about the peasant Indian who was named Juan Diego, who is now a saint. And he devoted himself to hard work in the fields and to manufacturing mats. He owned a piece of land and a small house on it. And Juan Diego, he was happily married, but he had no children. Sometime between the years 1524 and 1525, they believe, he was converted and baptized, as well as his wife. And he received his Christian name, Juan Diego. And his wife took the name of Maria Lucia. Now, sadly, Maria Lucia became sick and died in the year 1529. And so, heartbroken Juan moved to live with his uncle, Juan Bernardino, in Tolopatac, which was about 9 miles closer to their church. And he was a devoted and dedicated follower of Jesus. He walked every Saturday and Sunday, many miles to church. And he would depart early in the morning, before dawn, to be on time for Mass. And, of course, his religious instruction classes. And he walked on naked feet because this was, the way people of his class lived. And it was only higher in social classes that wore sandals. And they were made with fibers of vegetable fibers of leather. So they had either way, depending on what they had for materials, they would either use the fiber or they would use leather to make their sandals. And on cold mornings, he would wear a coarse woven cactus cloth as a mantle, known as a tilma. And this was made from fibers of the maguey cactus. Again, cotton only reserved to the upper Aztec classes. Now, during one of his walks, and it used to take about 3.5 hours between the villages and the mountains, the first apparition occurred. And he was roughly at this time about 57 years old, which at that time, when life expectancy was barely above 40, that was pretty old. So the first apparition took place on December 9th, 1531, on a Saturday, just before dawn, as Juan Diego was on his way to pursue his divine worship and engage in his own errands. And as he reached the base of the hill known as Tepeyac, the break of the day came, and he heard singing atop the hill. And he thought, boy, this is beautiful. This singing is, it's got to be by many different birds. It's gorgeous. And occasionally the voices of the songsters would cease. The song was very mellow and delightful. Excelled that, actually, of the pretty singing birds, Juan Diego thought. So he stopped to take a look. And he said to himself, by fortune, am I worthy of what I hear? Maybe I'm dreaming. Am I awake? Where am I? Am I now in the terrestrial paradise which our elders had told us about? Perhaps I am now in heaven? So Juan is having a very deep experience here. And he begins and has the insight that this may be something a lot more natural than beautiful singing birds. So he was looking toward the east, which is on top of this mountain, on top of this hill, Tepeyac, from where this celestial chant that he thought was birds were coming, and it suddenly ceased. And there was nothing but silence. And then he heard a voice from above the mount saying to him, Juanito, Juan Dieguito. And he ventured and went to where he was called. Now, he wasn't frightened. On the contrary, he was overjoyed. And he climbed the hill to see whom called him. And when Juan Diego reached the summit, he saw a lady. A lady was standing there and told him to approach. Now, Juan Diego, he knew this was something special, and he marveled because he knew this was of a supernatural grandeur. Her garments were shining like the sun. The cliff where she rested her feet, pierced with glitter, resembled an anklet of precious stones, and the earth sparkled like a rainbow. The weeds which grew there appeared like emeralds, their foliage like turquoise, and the branches and thorns glistened like gold. He bowed before her and heard her words tender and courteous, like someone who charms and esteems you highly. She said, Juanito, the most humble of my sons, where are you going? And he replied, my lady, I have to reach your church in Mexico to pursue things divine, taught and given to us by our priests or delegates of our Lord. and she spoke to him. Know and understand well, you, the most humble of my sons, that I am the ever-virgin Holy Mary, Mother of the true God, from whom we live, of the Creator of all things, Lord of heaven and earth. And I wish that a temple be erected here, quickly, so I may therein exhibit and give all my love, compassion, help, and protection, because I am your merciful mother, to you and to all the inhabitants of this land, and all the rest who love me, invoke, and confide in me, to listen to their lamentations, and remedy all their miseries, afflictions, and sorrows, and to accomplish what my clemency pretends. Go to the palace of the Bishop of Mexico, and you will say to him that I manifest my great desire that here on this plain a temple be built to me. You will accurately relay all you have seen and admired and what you have heard. Be assured that I will be the most grateful and will reward you, because I will make you happy and worthy of recompense for the effort and fatigue in what you will attain for what I have entrusted. Behold, you have heard my mandate, my humble son. Go and put forth all your effort. And at this point, Juan Diego bowed before her and said, My lady, I'm going to comply with your mandate. Now I must part from you, I, your humble servant. And then Juan Diego descended to go comply with his errand and went by the road which runs directly to Mexico City. Now, having entered the city, and without delay, Juan Diego went straight to the bishop's palace. And he was recently arrived there by a prelate named Father Juan de Zumagara, and he was a Franciscan. And on arrival, he endeavored to see him. He pleaded with the servants to announce him. And after a long wait, finally, he was called and advised that the bishop had ordered his admission. As Juan Diego entered, he bowed, and on bended knees, he delivered the message from the Lady of Heaven. He told the bishop all that he had seen and heard. And the bishop certainly thinks this is incredible. This is unbelievable. And the bishop told him, You will return, my son, and I will hear you at my pleasure. I will review it from the beginning and will give thought to the wishes and desires for which you have come. Now, Juan Diego had to leave, and he was sad because the message had not been yet realized in any of its form. And we look at this and we see that the bishop is using wisdom and prudence in this case, as the church does with all apparitions and with supernatural miracles, whether they be Eucharistic miracles or healing, say it, Lord. It has to have every possibility of a natural cause exhausted before these apparitions, before miracles will be authorized by the church as authentic. So we can't fault the bishop. We've got to put ourselves in his place. What if somebody came to us and said, hey, especially, somebody like Juan Diego that's not one of the more educated, upper echelon people that we tend to admire as human beings and put our trust and credibility in. So the bishop in this case is showing quite a bit of wisdom. So Juan Diego returned on the same day to the hill. And he met Our Lady from heaven, who was awaiting him. And she was in the same spot as when he first saw her. And when he saw her, he prostrated himself and said, "Lady, I went where you sent me to comply with your command. With difficulty, I entered the prelate's study. I saw him, and I exposed your message. He received me, and he listened, but it appears he doesn't believe me. I perfectly understood by the manner in which he replied that he believes it to be an invention of mine, that you wish that a temple be built here to you, and it's not your order. Now I exceedingly beg you, lady, that you entrust the delivery of your message to someone of importance, well-known, respected, and esteemed, so that they may believe in him, because I am a nobody. I am a small rope, a tiny ladder, the tail end, a leaf. And you, my lady, you send me to a place where I never visit nor repose. Please excuse my great unpleasantness, and let not fretfulness befall my lady and my all." So here is Juan Diego, and he realizes his status. And yet how many times, for instance, we go to Lourdes and see St. Bernadette, or St. Jacinto, San Francisco, and Sister Lucia, the seers at Fatima. Children that are childlike in their behavior, that God chooses to make his great message, his mother, to come and give us messages of hope and consolation through the eyes of children who just trust and believe simply. And the Blessed Virgin answered Juan Diego back, "Hark, my son, the least. You must understand I have many servants and messengers to whom I must entrust the delivery of my message and carry my wish. But it is of precise detail that you yourself solicit and assist, and that through your mediation my wish be complied. I earnestly implore, my son the least, and with sternness I command that you again go tomorrow and see the bishop. You go in my name and make known my wish in its entirety, that he has to start the erection of a temple, which I ask of him. And again, tell him that I, in person, the ever Virgin Holy Mary, Mother of God, sent you." Juan Diego replied, "Lady, let me not cause you affliction. Gladly and willingly I will go to comply with your mandate. Under no condition will I fail to do it, for the way is not even distressing. I will go to do your wish, for perhaps I will not be heard with liking, or if I am heard, I might not be believed. Tomorrow afternoon, at sunset, I will come to bring you the result of your message with the prelate's supply." Juan Diego then left to rest in his home. Now, the next day, Sunday, after hearing Mass, and after the crowd had left, Juan went to the palace of the bishop. And again, with much difficulty was he able to see him. And Juan Diego knelt before the bishop's feet, and he was sad, and he actually cried as he again explained what the lady from heaven wanted, that she wanted this temple built to her. She willed it to be. And the bishop, of course, again, in his wisdom, asked many things. Examples where he had seen her and how she looked. And Juan Diego described everything to the bishop. Now, notwithstanding his precise explanation of her figure and all that he had seen and admired, which in itself reflected her as being the Holy Mother of Jesus, our Savior. Again, Bishop Zamaragara did not give it credence. And he asked that a request be granted. And it was that a sign must be very necessary so that he could believe that it really was from the Blessed Virgin Mary. And Juan Diego went again to the Blessed Virgin, and he brought the answer from the bishop. The lady, listening and hearing him, told him, "Well and good, my little dear. You will return here tomorrow, so you can take to the bishop the sign he has requested. With this he will believe you, and in this regard he will not doubt you, nor will he be suspicious of you. And know, my little dear, that I will reward your solicitude and effort and fatigue spent on my behalf. Lo, go now. I will await you here tomorrow." The following day, Monday, December 12th, Juan Diego was to carry his sign so he could be believed. And you know what? He failed to return. Because when Juan Diego reached his home, his beloved uncle, Juan Bernardino, had become very sick. Very sick. So Juan Diego did what any of us would do. He summoned a doctor. And the doctor came with him. But he was so ill, the doctor said, it is too late for your uncle, Juan Diego. It's too late. By nightfall, his uncle requested that by break of day he go to the church and summon a priest to prepare him and hear his confession, because he was certain it was time for him to die and that he would not arise nor get well. So on that Tuesday before dawn, Juan Diego came home. Juan Diego left his home to go to Tlatelolco to summon the priest where the church was. And as he approached the road, which joined the slope to the Tepeyac hilltop, he said, "If I proceed forward, the lady's going to see me, and she may detain me, because she wants that sign. She wants to give that sign to the bishop so that temple could be built, as she said. But my uncle is dying. No, I'm going to go to the priest first." So, very human. Juan Diego's, again, he knows the dire straits his uncle is in. His uncle's requested a priest to give him those last rites. And Juan knows he may not have very time. Very human, very real. So he went around the hill. And he thought he would not be seen by the Blessed Virgin Mary. And what happens? Juan Diego looks up, and the Blessed Virgin descends from the top of the hill. And she approached him and said to him, "What's there, my son Luis? Where are you going?" And he bowed before her, and he saluted her and said, "Lady, I'm going to cause you grief. Know that a servant of yours is very sick, my uncle. He has contracted the plague and is near death. And I am hurrying to your house, your church in Mexico, to call one of your priests, beloved by our Lord, to hear his confession and absolve him. Because since we were born, we were taught to prepare for death. But if I go, I shall return here soon, so I may go to deliver your message. Lady, forgive me. Be patient with me for the time being. I will not deceive you. Tomorrow I will come in all haste, And after listening to Juan Diego, the Blessed Virgin said, "Hear me, and understand well, my son, the least, that nothing should frighten nor grieve you. Let not your heart be disturbed. Do not fear that sickness, nor any other sickness or anguish. Am I not here, who am your mother? Are you not under my protection? Am I not your health? Are you not happily within my fold? What else do you wish? Do not grieve, nor be disturbed by anything. Do not be afflicted by the illness of your uncle, who will not die from it. Be assured that he is now cured." And at that very moment, as it was later learned, Juan Diego's uncle was cured. Now, Juan Diego, when he heard these words from Our Lady, was greatly consoled. He was happy. And now he begged to be excused. Look at the trust here. He begged to be excused, to be off to see the bishop, to take to him that sign of proof so that he might be believed. And so the Blessed Virgin Mary, the Lady from Heaven, ordered him to climb to the top of the hill where they had previously met. She told him, "Climb, my son the least, to the top of the hill where you saw me, and I gave you orders. You will find my different flowers. Cut them, gather them, assemble them, and then come and bring them before my presence." Immediately, Juan Diego climbed the hill. And as he reached the summit, he was amazed to see that so many different varieties of exquisite roses were blooming long before the time when they were to bud. Because being out of season, they would freeze. And they were fragrant and covered with dewdrops of the night. And it resembled precious pearls, he said. And immediately he started to cut them. He gathered them all and placed them in his tilma. And the hilltop, it was no place for any kind of flowers to grow because it had many crags, thistles, thorns, and mesquites, nopales. Occasionally some weeds would grow during this time. But it was now the month of December. It was December 12th. And all the vegetation was destroyed by frost. Again, he immediately went down the hill and brought the different roses which he had cut to the Lady from Heaven. So as she saw them, she, our Blessed Virgin Mother herself, took the roses with her own hand and began placing them back in the tilma, saying, "My son the least, this diversity of roses is the proof and the sign which you will take to the bishop. You will tell him in my name that he will see in them my wish, and that he will have to comply to it. You are my ambassador, most worthy of all confidence. Rigorously, I command you that only before the presence of the bishop will you unfold your mantle and disclose what you are carrying. You will relate all and well, and you will tell him that I ordered you to climb this hilltop, to go and cut flowers, and all that you saw and admired, so you can induce the prelate to give his support, with the aim that is a temple to be built and erected as I have asked." Now, after the Lady from Heaven had given Juan Diego his marching orders, he was on his way by the road that went directly to Mexico. But this time Juan was very happy and assured of success, and he carried with great care what he bore in his tilma, being careful that nothing would slip from his hands. And he was enjoying the fragrance of these beautiful, varied flowers. Juan Diego reached the bishop's palace. And once again, he waited a long time. And the servants of the bishop came near him to see what he had and to satisfy their curiosity that this man kept coming back, and he was different this time. There was a confident air about him. And yet, Juan Diego, seeing as they pressed in on him that he could not hide what he had, and he didn't want them to, push or maul him to uncover the tilma, decided himself to just a little bit uncover that tilma that had the beautiful roses. And they saw that. And they were all different roses of Di Castilla. And they knew that they were out of season. And they were thoroughly amazed because these roses were so fresh and in full bloom, so fragrant, so beautiful. And they were overcome and tried to seize and pull 3 times some of those flowers from the tilma, but they weren't successful. Because when they went to get the flowers, they were unable to see the real flowers. They were prevented. Instead, they appeared painted or stamped or sewn on the cloth. So what they witnessed, these beautiful fragrance, these real flowers, when they reached to get them, it was as if they weren't there but were part of the cloth. And they hurriedly went to tell the bishop what they had seen, and that the Indian who had come so many times once again wished to see him. Now, upon hearing this, Bishop Zamarata realized that what he carried was proof that he needed to confirm and comply with the Indian requested, because he knew what he had asked. So immediately, the bishop ordered Juan Diego to be admitted. And as he entered, Juan Diego knelt before him, as he was accustomed to do. And he told him, "Bishop, I have brought the sign that you asked for." Roses that he had picked high on the hilltop of Tepeyac. And carefully, he unfolded his white cloth where he had the flowers. And when all the different variety of roses scattered to the floor, there suddenly appeared the drawing of the presaged image of the ever-Virgin Holy Mary, Mother of God, in the manner that we see today, kept in the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Juan Diego's tilma. And when the bishop saw the image, he and all who were present immediately fell to their knees, because the Blessed Virgin was greatly admired. And they rose to see her. They shuddered. And with sorrow, they demonstrated that they contemplated her with their hearts and minds. The bishop, for doubting, with sorrowful tears, prayed and begged forgiveness for not having attended to her wish and request in the first place. When he rose to his feet, he untied from Juan Diego's neck the cloth on which appeared the image of the Lady from heaven, and he took it to be placed in his chapel. And Juan Diego remained one more day in the bishop's house at the bishop's request. The following day, he told him, "Well, show us where the Lady from heaven wished her temple to be erected." And after the dedication of the new church, the sacred image was transferred there so that the people would see and admire it. The entire city was aroused now, and they came to see and admire the image and to pray. And they marveled at the fact that Our Lady appeared as did her divine miracle, because they knew that no living person of this world had painted that precious image. Now, there's a lot to the Our Lady of Guadalupe, and I may do another show on it with more of the scientific bent. But I want to quickly go to a little bit of the science there, because a couple things too before we'll get to this. But if I do that at a show, because there's such scientific research now, it's amazing what this image is in our modern technology is proven. It's staggering. But and I want to just talk a little bit more today about St. Juan Diego and the apparition. Now, to this day, the image remains unexplained. And more than 450 years after it was created, despite many, many tests by scientists, they don't know how this image got there. First of all, the tilma, which constitutes the canvas, if you will, of the miraculous picture of Our Lady, again, as I mentioned earlier, this fiber wouldn't last more than 20 years. And in 1936, one of the earlier tests, a professor from Mexico City, Fritz Hahn, took from the tilma 2 fibers, one that was red, the other that was yellow, and he brought them to Germany for a closer examination. And there, Dr. Richard Kuhn, who was a Nobel Prize winner and director of the Department of Chemistry at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, came to the conclusion that the fibers in question contained no artificial coloring, neither mineral, vegetable, animal, or synthetic. And in 1951, Jose Carlos Salina Chavez examined a photograph of the face, and he discovered that the image of what clearly appears to be a bearded man reflected in the right eye of the Virgin. And it is located on the left eye, too. And since that discovery, many people have had the opportunity to inspect closely the eyes of the Virgin on the tilma, including more than 20 physicians and ophthalmologists. All of them came to the conclusion that the bearded man was Juan Diego. And what's interesting is that the image has been mysteriously protected from malevolent attacks over the centuries. For example, on November 14th in 1921, Luciano Perez, he was a worker there, came to lay a wreath of flowers on the main altar of the basilica, just in front of the miraculous image of the Virgin. And he had hidden a bomb in the wreath, which exploded when he left the church. Now, the bomb blast destroyed the steps of the altar, the candelabras, and even the windows of neighboring homes. But the window protecting the image remains intact. So, again, I don't have on this show enough time to go into the scientific research with the eyes and the images, because there's more people involved in there now that they've seen through some of the spectrographs that they use. It's fascinating. And how the tilma, just to give you, for instance, is actually now technology has revealed that it actually sits a little bit off the fibers, which in itself is, that's miraculous. So it's just incredible, the story and the scientific aspect, and we could do a whole show on that, and perhaps we will, on the just the scientific aspect of this apparition from today's show. So, as I mentioned, there are many, many cures, and that's all part of, when the church looks at an apparition and the miracles and the supernatural aspects of this, including the canonization. And Juan Diego is a saint now. I mentioned that over 10 million visit the Basilica. 24 popes have also officially honored Our Lady of Guadalupe, including St. John Paul II, and he visited the shrine 4 times. And he was responsible, too, for the canonization of St. Juan Diego. So you can see that this is an important apparition. And a quick thing on the basilica itself. The present basilica that resides in Guadalupe today was constructed on the site of an earlier 16th century church that was finished actually in 1709. That was the old basilica. And due to time and the basilica aging, it became dangerous because it began to sink at its foundations. The new modern structure, the new basilica was built between the years 1974 and 1976, where, of course, the original image of the Virgin of Guadalupe is now housed in this new basilica. And I mentioned earlier in the show that there was a lot going on in this particular century. And again, you see, I want to point out that when we do the other show, if we do this, one of the things as Our Lady's, what she wore in her mantle was very significant to the Aztecs, very significant. For one, they were big into this. I just give you a quick note here. For the image was of Our Lady. In this image, the sun was behind, and the moon, this crescent, was at her feet. And what we see from this is that we must remember that the Aztecs really worshipped, right, the stars, the constellation, the moon, and certainly the sun. And in Our Lady's apparition and what is on the tilma that you can exhibit, that you can see today, and is exhibit at the shrine, is that they knew right away from Our Lady's mantle that this was something that pertained to everything they believed, and that this woman, she superseded the sun, the moon, the stars, the constellation, that she was with child, and that all this took place because thousands, tens of thousands of Indians converted, and it made up the tens of thousands that were being lost to the Protestant Reformation. And it's a fascinating thing, and more importantly, the Aztec sacrifices stopped immediately. So no more human sacrifices, because these people knew, these Indians knew, that this lady was from heaven, that this lady was from the true God who had sent her, and to turn from these false gods, these idols, and to end the human sacrifice that they had practiced so long. And that in itself is remarkable, because you're talking an entire culture shift, an entire break from idols, an entire culture that now has changed and recognized the true God and wanted not human sacrifice, but peace and love to guide. Now, when we look at this for our own, I mentioned that today, for a lifestyle, that millions of babies are aborted, that they are sacrificed. And one thing we want to see is that, again, this apparition came at a critical moment in history. And we are at critical moments in our time in history. And certainly there is some great movements being made in the pro-life movement. And some are beginning to wonder if the Supreme Court will revisit Roe versus Wade and overturn it. And one thing we see from St. Juan Diego is that he persevered. Like us, he worried and dealt with the practicality, in this case his uncle, who we know was miraculously cured, and didn't give up. And that perseverance pays off. That's why we must continue to pray to Our Lady of Guadalupe to end this abortion. And I mentioned at the beginning of the show, this is what sometimes God does to let us know that he truly exists. When we got bogged down with the daily aspects of our life, and we turn away from the supernatural and question whether anything exists, whether God exists, are these apparitions true? We get these in history. We get these signs to keep us marching, to keep us like St. Juan Diego persevering. I mentioned that there were signs, and we do the other show, we'll get into this, like the presence of that black crescent moon that was representative to the Aztecs of death. And again, remember when the 80,000, they were sacrificing these people to serpents. And that, in this indigenous culture, was a symbol of life. And yet, when they saw that Our Lady of Guadalupe was above this meant everything to them. Because they believed and they knew. They believed and they knew that God existed. The true God, Jesus Christ, with all power. And when we look, when Our Lady was talking to Juan Diego, what did she say? That he is the God of creation. And I think sometimes we tend to forget that. So, as we close out the show tonight, we can pray and turn to Our Lady of Guadalupe for our needs, because as she told Juan Diego, she is our mother. Do we have anything to fear? She is our protectress. So have confidence, and have confidence even in tumultuous times in which we live, that, as Our Lady told us, Jesus Christ is the creator of all things, and he is the one true God. And we can put our trust in him and pray to the Holy Spirit that we too can have that gift of supernatural grace to transcend the reality we live now and touch the supernatural, the reality that is more real than what we see here in our lives on this beautiful planet which God has given us. So take heart, brothers and sisters. Believe and trust in the one who created us and the one who loves us, who loved us so much, he died for us on a cross to give us eternal life. Good night, and God bless.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.